Dickinson is with us also. She's project editor at Foreign Policy, who just went to Liberia, where over 125,000 people from the Ivory Coast have fled. Talk about the situation there, and talk then about how Gbagbo remained in power and where his support came from.
Well, right from the beginning, it's important to remember that Gbagbo had about 50% of the country's support. This election was contested. It was very close. Even according to the official results that the UN certified, he won 46% of the vote. So we're talking about a country that's been polarized, not just for months during this crisis, but really for years. This political divide goes back much farther than just this current election. Now, in the region, I think everyone was fearing that this crisis was going to do exactly what it did do, which is spill over the borders. I was in Liberia. I spoke with government officials there who were absolutely petrified that this was going to cross over the border and reignite a civil war that country is just struggling to recover from there. As you mentioned, 125,000 refugees in the country now, putting extreme stress and strain on an area of the region, an area of the country that's already very impoverished, very resource-strapped. And in addition, there were many reports throughout the crisis of armed combatants going over the border and crossing into the Liberian side from Ivory Coast, threatening to arm once again Liberians.
Can you talk about the divide between Muslims and Christians?
Absolutely. So Ivory Coast is a country that's approximately 50% Muslim, 50% Christian. It breaks down much closer on sort of ethnic and north-south lines. The north of the country has traditionally been controlled by people who have supported Alassane Ouattara. The south of the country is Gbagbo's stronghold, and so particularly in the capital of Abidjan, he had very, very strong support.
And what about the role of the Christian right here in the United States in relation to Gbagbo?
Well, this is a very interesting story. Gbagbo is a very charismatic guy, and he's made a lot of friends over the years here in the United States in the evangelical Christian community. One of his most prominent supporters was a senator, Senator Inhofe, who met him at the National Prayer Breakfast several years back and formed something of a relationship with him. Through that relationship, Gbagbo, throughout this electoral process, began to feed information to some of his supporters here in the U.S. that he claimed indicated that he had actually won the election. Well, this took hold, and a number of supporters rallied their sort of troops behind him here in the evangelical media, namely through the Christian Broadcasting Network, a network that's owned by Pat Robertson, who came out very vehemently in support of Gbagbo, and really in a sort of tragic way, classifying the crisis in religious terms, something that really it hasn't been broken down on the ground. That is to say that Pat Robertson came out and explicitly said this is a country that's governed now by a Christian, Mr. Gbagbo, and should Ouattara take power, he is a Muslim, and so we'll see this country, this good Christian country, pass into the hands of Muslims. It was a statement that I think probably couldn't have been helpful on the ground.
I wanted to turn right now to a quote of Pat Robertson.
American press and the international press, I have found not one word spoken in favor of President Laurent Gbagbo of the Ivory Coast. And everybody says this man is an evil thug who needs to go. That's not true. He's a Christian. He's a nice person. And he's run a fairly clean operation in the Ivory Coast.
Elizabeth Dickinson.
Well, there's certainly something to be said for Laurent Gbagbo's work to transition the country to democracy up to a point. I think it's clear, however, following these elections, that he's certainly no supporter of democracy, given that he didn't respect these elections.
And Gbagbo's argument that neo-colonial French forces are supporting Ouattara he's seen as conducive to business interests like coca.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, this is the perception that Ouattara has fought from the beginning. There is evidence that he has a good relationship with French President Sarkozy, but the French from the beginning have been very clear not to be seen as supporting either candidate, knowing that it would be a liability in a former French colony to come out as having one candidate be the sort of supposed French candidate or the other way around. Gbagbo, however, has really based a lot of his popularity on this very fiery anti-colonial rhetoric. And so that was, in fact, one of my main concerns looking at the way that he was eventually removed from power. Simply, with the assistance of French troops, this really plays into a divide that Gbagbo very skillfully cultivated during his time in office, wherein he may be seen by some of his supporters as a martyr who left at the hands of the French.
Well, Elizabeth Dickinson, I want to thank you very much for being with us from Foreign Policy.